It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and action.
Hey everybody, I'm Cathey Armillas. Welcome to It's About to Go Down.
And it is about to go down. What's going on, everybody? I'm Marc Williams, and we are here. Oh, we go back. We go back, and we're coming back together again. My sister from the Great Day Squad. That's a whole story unto itself. Miss K, Miss Kristeena Alexander. Hold on, I gotta drop the accolades. WNBA veteran.
Woo!
Transformational coach.
Woo!
Great Day Squad coach. Living her best life and trying to do it miraculously and marvelously. Look, I just tripped over that word because I'm just so tripped up and excited to have you here. And I love how Kristeena says, I'm here to tell some of my stories. And that's so befitting because, Kristeena, you are a storyteller. And the stories and the topic and the idea that we're going to talk about can be wrapped up in one word: transitions.
Yes. Well,
Kristeena, welcome to It's About to Go Down, my sister.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Marc, Cathey. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's get right to it. My people,
yeah.
let's do it.
Oh.
Well, then, Kristeena, let's jump into it.
Sure.
You know, this is one word, transition.
Mhm.
But beneath that word is so much depth. And I would just like for you to talk to us about why are you so passionate about this topic of transitions? Like, what does that mean for you?
That's a good question. When I hear the word transition, it's almost as if all of the accolades, all of the trials, tribulations, and then most importantly, it's the people that come to mind. So I won't say that I've lived a good life. I've enjoyed it. I've been, fortunate. I'm humbled. I'm blessed. But it's the trials and tribulations. And then more importantly, like I said, it's the people that have been with me since day one. My mother, God rest my father's soul, wherever he may be, my two brothers, my aunts, my uncles, the people who supported me when the transition, I couldn't spell the word transition, but to go through the success that I had as an athlete early on in life. I mean, it wasn't just, I got a ribbon. I was actually pretty that freaking good. And so to go through that and to prepare for what was to come, you always want your kids to go to college, get an education. My parents stressed that. But it was trials and tribulation. It was sacrifice. My parents, we don't come from silver spoons. They would work, blue collar family. My mother was a teacher. My father was a railroad conductor. And so they preached to us, success is on the other side. And in order for you to get there, you've got to begin to transition from what you thought you knew to what the people that are you surrounded by, the coaches, your teammates. And so for me, that stuck with me from elementary school to high school to when I really did get to college, when it was really go time. And that's when I began to understand the transitions. When you come in as a freshman, you really do think you know what you're talking about until you realize I know absolutely nothing. Not only do I not know anything, but you have this bravado about you that you're just invincible. And so the transition is really understanding where you are, how you got there, and that the people that are in your life are going to help you get to the next level. Because there's more. There's more to come. There's more to do. There's more to experience. And so the word transition during that phase means a whole lot different than what it means to me now. Now that I'm on the other side of my sport, I'm in career, I continue to go through the transitions, but not at the same level, not at the same pace, not at the same cadence. Yes, I still network and meet people, but it's different now. I'm doing more serving from the outside looking in rather than the inside looking in. And so, transitions, it's continuous. It never stops. It really doesn't. So that's just a little nugget.
You're full of nuggets. Let me tell you that. I know. She's like, that's just a little one. Kristeena, I love this so much. You've already blown my mind a little bit because I think when people say the word transition, it sounds like it's a very short time. It's like, oh, I'm doing this thing and then I'm doing that thing. And now my mind is already expanding on like how long a transition, and sometimes you don't even know you're in transition until you're on the other side of it too, which is something I kind of heard from what you just said. It's okay. I have a question to ask you about that because
Sure.
it's very fascinating. So it's like, your parents kind of taught you this thing of like, hey, if you want success, you're going to have to work through it. You show up, you're a freshman, you're like, what's up, everybody? I already know everything.
I've
What?
arrived. It's
I've
me.
arrived. Yep,
Hi.
exactly. When did you start? Like, what were the inklings? When did you start to go, oh God, I'm in the middle of, I was doing this, like, and I can tell that I'm transitioning into something else. Like, when did that hit you?
That's interesting. I would like to say that, just as you mentioned, the transitions continued to happen. There wasn't a start and there wasn't there's no end point, because as a freshman, I do remember, I like to think I was pretty good, but I was happy where I was. I loved basketball and I was in it. I slept, ate, talked basketball. But once the accolades began to come from the outside world, I did an article for ESPN. I was in Faces in the Crowd. And back then, there was no social media. That was the thing. That
Yeah.
was the transition between
Damn.
I'm a New Yorker, so the Daily News, Newsday, those things weren't right, Mark. Like those things were, if you were in the Daily News and the Newsday, or you were on MSG, that was it. You arrived.
Yeah.
And so I began to realize that it got bigger with ESPN. I was doing talk shows in the Virginia area. And I was like, wow, like this is it's different now. They have makeup. I have to put on makeup. I have to put on things that as a high schooler, I didn't have to do. And so I began to realize that the transition was happening. It was also happening on the court in terms of my attention to detail. And sometimes it didn't always translate with my teammates. And I think early on, that was one of the things that was different for me and hard for me to deal with. Like, why can't they do that? Like, why don't they watch more film? But that was just me going through something that they weren't at that particular time. I ended up transferring. I wanted more from my career. So I went from a big fish, small pond to a small fish in a bigger pond. And that was a huge transition. But understanding, just like my parents had instilled in us, it's that success is on the other side. What are you willing to sacrifice? And so I made that sacrifice, and knowing that that transition was going to help elevate my career, because ultimately I wanted to play professionally. I never said the WNBA. I just said I want to play. I want to play basketball and make that a career. Like, I don't want to be a teacher like my mom, and I definitely don't want to work for the Long Island Railroad because I don't like collecting tickets like my dad. So I want to play ball. And so that transition began to manifest. What do I need to sacrifice now to get there? And that's pretty much, that was my mindset until I got to where I was going, which was I went from George Mason to George Washington. And then I realized, well, the transition happens all over again. A new team, a new coach, a new different classes. The education was different, a different environment. We went from Fairfax, Virginia to Washington, D.C. Different. And so the transitions were beginning to find out more about who I was. And this is where the transition begins to, I start to look inward now. As a freshman, I was like, well, we're here to play basketball, go to school, get good grades. But then I began to realize how I was showing up on the court, off the court, how I was being the best teammate I could to my teammates. And it was a young lady who's our assistant coach. And I gotta give her a shout out because she's instrumental in how I view myself now, was my assistant coach, Cathey Wilson. And she said to me one day, I'm sure she was saying it on the court because I was one of those players, why I got to do it your way? I'm doing it my way. She said, you're a leader. And I said, well, I don't want to be one. That was that right there was the poof, the aha moment. When someone realized in me what was already there, but I had never put a word to it, that I was a leader. I was a leader because when the lights weren't on, I was showing up. That I wasn't afraid to have difficult conversations with my head coach or to take, the brunt of it in game, out of game, preseason, out of season. You can ask any of my teammates, anyone that I played with, I had no problem leading from behind or leading in front. And so that's when I began to realize the transition was happening at a different pace. This was almost like a different chapter in transitioning. And from there, it just continued to grow. I mean, that was huge for me. I remember the letter she wrote me. I remember what it says. I still have it. It was like the light bulb went off. You're a leader, and therefore you conduct yourself in that manner. And even when you think you're not, you're still leading someone, because someone is always watching you.
Oh, so true. So
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that trend, and it continues on though, Mark. Like, obviously I took that with me. I graduated, went overseas, and then getting into the WNBA wasn't a smooth transition for me. I wasn't drafted. I thought I should have been. Thank you, Washington Mystics, for not drafting. But, you know, having those GMs, those execs tell me I need more experience. So I was transitioning from, again, high school, felt like I was on top of the world, to college, felt like I was on top of the world again. And then to get to the professional space and have to sacrifice and work hard and work harder, work different, work smarter, just to transition into this professional athlete that I had envisioned when I was like 5 years old. Didn't know what she was going to look like. But the transition, again, we're talking at least 30 years, 25 years. So when we talk about the start and the end, it just repeat and rinse, but sometimes it can look different. It can feel different. And it includes different people. The people who were instrumental in my high school career were different than the people who were instrumental in my college career. And we could use one episode to name all those people. But you know, once I got to the pros, it was different. It was my teammates. It was, you know, the people that I had engaged with after college in terms of, you know, wanting jobs and networking with people who had been fans of mine. Oh, we loved you on the court. If you ever need anything, you know, GW has a very vast community, especially with the alumni. And I was appreciative of that. That was also the transition, because they could see something. Hey, we think you'd be good at this. If you ever want an internship or we have a job, let us know. And so that transition began to happen slowly because my focus was just, you know, playing professionally, but it was happening. And when my career was over, that's when it came back full circle. I often tell people, so I played at 2 different schools, George Mason, George Washington. And the very person who gave me my first coaching job was my assistant coach at George Mason, Debbie Tannehill. And she said it, well, you should come back to coaching. And I looked at her and said, now, why would I want to do that? I want to play till the wheels fall off. And she said, I don't know, Kay, you're a point guard. You've always been good with detail and with people. That was somewhat similar to what Cathey was talking about in terms of being able to lead, having good relationships. And I got into coaching and did that for 10 years. But that was, I don't want to change anything about those 10 years. And any of the schools that I coached at, loved every single moment. And it was hard. You know, coaching, they glorified on, you know, March Madness. But the hard parts that come with it. But it was a transition all over again. I went from player to coach, and then going through those same things, having that same, you know, scouting report, having the same resources, but now I'm on the other side. So when I talk about being on the other side, I was no longer on court. I was off the court and having to share those stories, the ones that were good and the ones that weren't bad, but being able to relate to the young people, because they would always say, man, Coach K, you could still play. I said, no, that's your job now. I just want to be a vessel. So yeah, the transition, it doesn't stop.
It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't. But Mark, I wonder if you're wondering the same thing I am, or maybe it's just my brain that's always like, Kristeena has this amazing life. And as I listen to you talk, Kristeena, I think about what a high level athlete you have to be, and how disciplined you have to be to go through all those transitions. And not many, I mean, I'm talking about the whole world. The percentage of people that can go through the life that you had is tiny, right? And so you're talking about something that not everybody's been able to do. Many people, their biggest transition is like high school to college, or college into a career world, and that's it. They spend the whole rest of their life just building through that one transition. And you've already had multiple, and you've only we just started. Like, you didn't even keep going. You just stopped.
Right.
Right. I'm wondering though, if you were giving a TED talk about this, because this is always my brain, and there's this like big idea and you wanted to share it with the world, how would you wrap that up for the world? Like, what would you want people to know about transitions and what they should do with it?
That's a great question. First and foremost, that transitions happen to everybody. There's no age, there's no color, there's no gender. Transitions are what's happening within us. And oftentimes we only see what's happening outside or to us, but it's happening for us. And if I was to, and I say if because I look forward to traveling the world, TED talking about this topic, that transitions happen all throughout your life in so many different areas. It's not just career, it's not just sport, it's relationships, it's family, it's maturity, it's life lessons. And that when they happen, it's important for you to be able to conceptualize them, really put them somewhere where you can dissect it. I'm not saying you spend 10 years dissecting why you never made your JV team, but understanding where you were in that moment, like what you brought to the table. What were some of the superpowers that you had when you were 10? Because you do have some. You might have one or two. And then how did that grow? How did that pivot? How did that change as you went from that situation, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent? How did you take that information, take those experiences, and then move on to the next one? Because the next one you might not have seen. It might just appeared. It might have just been a situation where your father or mother got you a job. What are you doing with that experience as not making your JV team? How are you applying it? And so the transitions continue to build, almost like it's a stacking. So for me, it continues to stack because just as I explained, as a player, I went from this school to that school, this coach to that coach. And then literally 180, I became that coach. And I went from this school to that school. And I was not necessarily preaching the same story, but it was a relatable story. And without me going through it myself, I could never be able to share it with the rest of the world. And not just to share it, just to talk, but to say, hey, this is what worked for me and how I felt and what it did for me. But maybe this part of that story can work for you. Because we're all different. We're all going to experience it at different times, different ages. But the transition is continuous. You've got to continue to stack. Because what I was doing at 15, 17, 21, 25, those things mattered when it became 30, 35, and dot. Like it mattered. And unless I can pull from it, then it just becomes a Polaroid that sits in my attic. And I know I'm dating myself, but
I know.
there was we don't get to put it on Instagram back then.
Yeah. I love that.
Oh, wow. I love the visual of that Polaroid. There were a couple of things that you said that really stood out to me. One, about the sacrifice of transition. I wrote down the transitional sacrifice. The way you put it was very interesting, that we have to think about what we are willing to sacrifice for a transition. And I think we get caught up in the transition, the change. Something is different. And we even know that sometimes we even know we want to go through a transition, but we don't think about what we have to sacrifice or what we have to even give up or change in order to have that transition, right? If I'm playing basketball and I want to go pro, or I'm thinking about a career afterwards, I'm not always thinking about the sacrifice. I'm just thinking about the end result. So that concept was powerful for me. And then this other part you said about when we go through these transitions, think about how did you take what you learned? And my brain wanted to ask what before even how, because I'm wondering, Kristeena, how many people even think about what they have learned from their transition? So I give you an example. When I was in high school, from elementary through the 10th grade, I ran track. I thought I was going to run in the Olympics. Like, I loved running. Carl Lewis, that's all I heard. Carl Lewis, right? All right, I just aged myself. Right? I didn't even say Usain Bolt.
We know
right?
him. We know him at the job. We know him at the job.
When I hurt my hip, and I was afraid to run. I then ended up joining the drama club in high school. And I don't know if I ever thought about what I learned from that and what I could stack from that until you just mentioned it. But I will tell you this. Had I not transitioned or even analyzed and dissected that transition, Cathey, I don't know if I would have ever met you.
Mm.
And I know there's a whole lot behind there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if my life would have gone in this direction that would have led me to you, and that would have led me to you, Kristeena, had I not really dissected what that transition meant beyond, it's just a transition.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what you got me thinking about.
It's interesting you say that because, again, when I view transition, it's not just what's happening to me in the moment. I'd like to preface it as what's happening for me. Because a lot of things happen to us and it's not all meant to be internalized. Like that is, and I don't know, I don't remember when I actually perfected that, but I learned it. It was something that I learned, and I probably learned it from my parents, but that's something that we need to have those glasses for, as life will throw at us the whole kitchen sink plus what's in the basement, that it's not always happening to us, but it's happening for us. When you can conceptualize that, then you begin to look at, well, I did this for a period of time. What did I learn? What did I take away from that? Because I want to go do X, Y, and Z. Does that have anything to do with that? And if it does, you get to make the connection. Like you get to control how you show up with this new venture or these new friends or this new community or a new job or a new relationship. Like you get to choose. And so the stacking part is important because it already happened to you. There's things that you might not have realized or seen, and you may need to go back to some of the people you did it with. You know, Mark, like our first recording was different than our last recording. I might need to revisit that. That's why the people that you were doing it with are important, because they can kind of give you stories and context as well that, again, you can still stack as you approach this new venture, because it's important. Like you're going to have more than one job. Well, hopefully you're going to have more than one friendship. You're going to have more than one career. Well, for some folks, I know that maybe not, but for the most part, you want to continue to experience those things. And it's important that you don't do it alone and that you continue to utilize what you've already gone through, because you become the expert at that. You become the expert at your own story. And I always say that your experiences make you the expert.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Oh, yeah. So good. Wow. It makes me think too, the flip side. I know sometimes too, I think about it a lot. The people that Mark and I kind of surround ourselves with now, and they're people that are like creative, doing things. But there's a whole range of people. There's people that really have dialed in life and are kind of like, yeah, I did this career because my dad did it, and I'm doing the same thing. And I think about they're missing out on a lot of opportunity that you're talking about, Kristeena, because they're not even seeing a transition as being an opportunity. And it happens to all of us. And there are things that happen, but we don't have the lens always of it happened for us, but yet we think it happened to us. Ooh,
Absolutely.
it's so good. It's so good to think about. One of the things you got me really excited about, Kristeena, is consciously thinking about what transition am I in the middle of right now? Because there's probably a few that that I'm not conscious about. I'm transitioning into this part of my life, but I'm not really thinking about it because I'm just doing life every day, right? Mark, you're in a moment where your kids are on the precipice. I mean, not Dylan as much, but like of being out of the house, going to college. Like there's a new, different life that you're going to have in your family and with your kids. And so you're in the middle of a transition right now. And how are you doing that? Like, what are you being conscious about with that transition? I don't know. That's what my mind started bubbling on.
That's a great question, Kelly, because I actually want to add to that and say, Mar, have you even talked to your daughter about how she's consciously thinking about it? Now, we all have feelings and, dad-daughter relationship, love it. But consciously, has she ever thought, that you're leaving home, like you're leaving mom and dad, what do you even think about? What does she envision? What did she envision? Because arriving at this point is a win in and of itself. I'd add to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys shared that?
First of all, you got me all choked up and
I know.
terrified. I'm like,
Dad,
no,
Mom.
they're not leaving.
No, I don't want.
I think I need to have that whole conversation with myself first.
It's a
But
transition.
you raised such a good point. And to merge what you and Cathey are saying, like thinking about what transition am I going through right now? Because I love how you said it's continuous. There's always something you're going through, and getting people to think about that continuously. And I love how you said you don't have to psychoanalyze like every transition.
Yeah, you know.
You don't have to do
Right.
that.
Let's keep a balanced life, folks.
Yeah, for sure.
Healthy.
But being aware that you are going through some transitions and thinking about those that do require some dissecting and some analysis, right? And then how do you go through that process?
Yeah.
What are you sacrificing through that process?
Kristeena, I love this moment where you had the Cathey coach that told you that you were a leader. You didn't end up saying anything like if you had said that to somebody else, but then I envisioned you as a coach and you're seeing some of these girls and you're like, oh man, they're in like the same, they're thinking like I was thinking. They're like, I'm just out here to play ball. I'm not trying to like be a leader. And now not only do you have this vision because you can see further out than they can and from higher above, just meaning like you've got a bigger view. And so you see that and you're like, no, you're a leader. You're like, people are looking at you everywhere. But then you also have the story of like, girl, I was in the same spot as you. And so you now not only have that, you can double down with you that you actually have the story of living it as well. And I don't know if Cathey had that, it's almost like you have two great things going for you to like teach it to somebody else.
Yes, it's interesting you say that because I actually, so when Cathey approached me, that's all I remember is she said, she had made the statement, you're a leader. And I was like, I don't want to be a leader. I actually thought about what I was feeling, and I don't really remember specifically, but when I would show up for my players, I would always ask, and they will all tell you this, at 5 different schools that I coached at, I always used to ask them first, are you receiving? Like they could be upset, they could be cussing, they could be mad at the head coach, they could be mad at me. And I would always say, are you receiving? Yes, Coach K, I'm receiving. But see, the referee didn't. And I would always say, are you receiving? Because then I would get into, this is what I see you as. You are our leader and we need you to play better, et cetera, et cetera. So I always led with the one thing that Cathey was able to get me to hear what she was saying, to even receive that statement. Because no one had said it to me at that point. I'm sure people might have alluded to it, but Cathey said it plain as day, clear. There was no cloud. Yeah, I was clear on what she meant and what she said. And then I tried to recreate that just in my own way, that I would always ask them, are you ready to receive? And they would, Coach K, not right now. Okay, then.
So brilliant though. You know why? Because when Cathey said it to you, she said it as a statement like you should already know.
Yeah.
She didn't like say, don't you know you're a leader? She just said, you're a leader. And you're like, wait, what? And I love that you added this extra step for them where you're consciously showing them, are you receiving it? Are you receiving? Are you receiving? Are you open? Are you open right now? Basically, right? Yeah.
I think Cathey saw in me that I could receive it.
Yeah. And so
I
she
always wanted to
it.
make sure. Yeah, she knew. Cathey was like, no, you're ready for this conversation. Whereas I always wanted to ask for their permission, because once they opened up the door, then the floodgates were open for Coach K.
Yeah.
Kristeena, how does one know if they're ready to receive?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, the trust level between who's doing the giving and who's doing the receiving. There has to be some type of trust level, because, and again, in sport, we're excited, the adrenaline's flowing. We're not always hearing the tone and how we say things is taken 0 to 100. So I think it's the trust level between the interaction. I think that needs to have been at least established to some point. We don't have to be BFFs. I didn't have to coach you for 10 years, but some kind of trust level where you're able to articulate that. Are you ready to receive? And even when you say yes, you might not have been 100% in, but if you're 40% in, I, as the giver, can now articulate in a way that it can land. I may say 5 things to you. If 3 things land, we're good to go. If I say 2 things and only a half a thing lands, then the half a thing, I'll come back later. We got halftime. After the game, we're going to do some film work. So I look at it as the giver, I have to prep all of that. I have to, because I have already experienced that. That's the one, kind of going back to what you said, Cathey. I have that relatable experience and story, so that now when I'm the giver of the very thing, are you ready to receive? I understand. As long as I can get you to just pause for a second, and it might not land in that moment, Mark. Like, there's just no guarantee, but at least you hear me. Okay, we can always come back to it, but there's a trust. Without the trust, then you're just a stranger on the street asking me how to get to the restroom. I don't know.
Or a Polaroid in the, I love all these analogies.
Can you take a photo for us? Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I guess on the flip side too, as the giver, it must take a lot of patience, right? Because I can ask you if you're ready to receive, and are you receiving? I can see you are not at that 40% mark. And I see something new. I see you're ready for this transition. And I've got to be patient enough to let you go through whatever you're going through, so you can get to at least that 40% mark. That's powerful. I got to tell you, this is so way beyond sports.
It is. Oh my God. Way, way, way. You know what's so good about that? What you just said, Mark, is that is every parental relationship. You tell your kid 7,000 times one thing.
Brilliant.
And when they're 25, they tell you, oh my God, somebody told me this thing. And you're like, somebody told you that thing? Yeah, me. Like 800 times.
In one day.
Yeah, in one day. Exactly, Kristeena, in one day. But I think you know, and I could already see what kind of coach you are, Kristeena, and I love it. Like, I love that vibe, because that vibe is like, oh, we'll come back to it. We'll hit it again. We'll hit it again. I'm going to hit it again. Like, I love this vibe of like, I see you and I can see how much you're absorbing, and you don't have to absorb 100% the first time. If you absorb 1% right now, another 1%, and so I think, Mark, that's what you were asking and saying, and we can see that in our kids. Is like, sometimes they'll even make fun of us and mock us and repeat something that we've said. Yeah, Mark, you get that a lot. Where you get mocked for saying something. So they've absorbed at least 1%, you know, they're absorbing a little bit of it, because they can repeat it. And so I just love the flow that we're talking about now, because now you're actually, Kristeena, you're not talking about just one person having a transition. You're talking about the effect of all the people that are part of that transition. And that makes me really excited, because now you're talking about communities and people helping people. And like, I even would ask myself the question, whose transition am I a part of? Whether that be, it doesn't have to be a big grandiose one, but it could be anything. And then, so then it's beyond myself. It's outside of me as well.
Which is the interesting part about a transition. We started out talking how it was affecting for me, not to me, but ultimately, as I explained, that there's so many people that are with you on that ride, that it's not just you, because you become, instead of the receiver, you become the giver at some point. And that in and of itself is a huge transition, because as you just mentioned, Mark, you have to be in a position where you understand that that's your role that you play now to a certain group of people. That's the role that you play in your life at this particular point, at this particular job, in this particular relationship, that now you are the giver. So you're helping someone else transition. And then how do you approach that? I only mentioned the 40% because, you know, cell phone batteries at 40%, you don't need a charger, you know. But if you go lower than 40, you got to hook up somewhere. And anyone got a charger?
Oh, yeah. And if you get to a certain level, you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
my
Crisis.
life is going to be over.
Crisis. Mhm.
Crisis. Oh, that's so funny.
I love the
Hilarious.
metaphor.
Oh, the metaphor is so great. It's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, if I double down on that metaphor for a minute, Kristeena, I'm one of those weird perfectionists that I'm like, I get a little itchy when I'm like, oh, less than 80% makes me itchy.
Trust me.
I always want to keep it in a range that what if I go out and get caught in a storm somewhere? I'm gonna need more than
Crisis.
80%,
Mhm. Yeah, I try to keep it on 100 all day long.
right?
It never works. I flow at about 60, 65. And then I'm the same with you, Cathey. I start itching at about 40, 39, 35. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I must charge my phone. Turn it
Yeah.
off. It charges faster.
Yep. Plug it into the wall, not into your computer. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, we took a left turn here for a second, Mark, but the analogy's good. The analogy's so good. Oh,
No, the analogy is great because it, you know, it really raises this whole issue about readiness for transitions. And it's so funny because when you think about this whole concept that transitions are continuous, like no matter what your battery is on,
yeah.
there's a transition going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you have to understand that. And I like this whole idea that the transition is not always about you.
Mm-mm.
And not just meaning that there's other people who are part of your transition, but I love that thought that you might be a part of somebody else's transition. So I'll say this. I watched this special with Dave Chappelle recently. And at the end, well, it was all about being a big dreamer. And so I won't give it away for anybody who wants to watch it. Great routine. And at the end, what I will say is he reflects on his dream only to realize that it's less about his dream and more about how he might be a part of somebody else's dream. Like he's playing a role in somebody else's experience. And I think that's powerful too, because a lot of times when we think about transitions, to your point, Kristeena, it's very I-centric.
Yeah.
What transition am I going through?
Right.
You know, but what transition are the people around me going through, and how can I be a giver for that?
I love that so much, Mark. And it makes me think of like, are y'all ready to play a game? We've got to play a game, Mark. We haven't done it in a while. We got to play a game. Come on.
Okay.
Every once in a while, Kristeena, I'll be like, let's play a game. And the game is this, because we've got to this point where we're like, we can be part of other people's transition. I'd love for all of us to think of somebody else's transition that we are a part of right now, and maybe talk about that. I mean, it's just got me thinking of all the people around me and in my life and whatnot.
Okay.
I
got it.
Kristeena? Okay, you got it. I was like, you sound
it.
like you got it.
Got it. I was trying to decide who I would select because there's quite a few.
Yeah.
But there's one young lady individual who I currently mentor, and she's going through a lot of transitions. But the one kind of transition I try to focus on or try to create a visual for her, and she's not sport related. She don't play any basketball, but I'm always like, we're only in the first quarter. There's 4 quarters. That's it. And she's like, well, what do you mean? So we're just in the initial stages. Let's not think about how we're going to win the championship today. Today, we need to win the things today that are going to get us to the second quarter. And so I have to look at her transition as it's huge. It really is. She wants to get her degree. She wants to do it for her family. She'll be the first one. And I'm like, that's a huge thing. She's a decent student. She's not the best student, but there's still some things we can do on a daily basis that I can help her with, that if she stays disciplined, as we mentioned, as a professional athlete, you have to be disciplined. Mindset that I think she could do better in the second quarter, By the time we get to halftime, I think then she could reflect and say, you know what, coach, I think I hear you. I can receive now. Her third and fourth quarter can be better so that she can get to the actual championship, which is her graduation. But if I look at it as I'm going to make her take the half court shot today, we'd be going home early in March Madness.
Yeah.
So I try to make the big rocks, smaller rocks as we go through the mini transitions, because there's, the smaller transition, then there's a medium-sized transition or a bigger. I like to just put it into little segments rather than, wow, that's a lot. And so that story I share because she doesn't understand at this particular point all of what her transition looks like. She's not in the space where she can really articulate inside and out. She only just sees it as I will need to do better, and I've got to find scholarships, and I've got to study better. And I'm like, okay, let's just get one win today. Let's get in this first quarter. We'll get to the second quarter.
I love that.
Love that story. You are a storyteller. You are
a great storyteller, and you're a coach. That's a very good coach right there.
Thank you.
We're not trying to take that. Yeah. I love that. Mark, do you have yours?
Yeah. What comes to mind for me is someone who is going through transitions with career and came to me for help because of a job that she was in and was struggling there. And since then has moved on and wants to continue trying to work towards the end of the fourth quarter. But wants to pause for a little while until she could figure out what she wants to do next. And I guess there was that, alluding to what you said earlier, Cathey, that parent in the head that's like, all right, but come on, we got to figure it out now. Like, let's keep the work going. Let's not stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's either we work on this or we don't work on this. And it was like, no. One, I realized with this person might need options. And so what I ended up presenting was, well, you can take a break, but while you're taking a break, consider this or that or that or this. It's not that you're not ready for a transition. It's just that you don't realize the different next steps you can take towards the transition. And sometimes we don't give people the option. It's just like, just go this way and that's it. And we don't always, as givers, give options for next steps. That is
very powerful, Mark. Yeah.
That was a good one. Because that's really important. Options.
Yeah. I think you're right too, because I think sometimes when you feel like you might be helping or guiding somebody, you think you have a path and not allowing them. There might be a path, and Kristeena, it sounds like this might have happened to you in your life in different ways, but there might have been paths that you didn't even know existed until you were on it. And so that wouldn't, if the option didn't either present itself somehow, by accident or by fate or by whatever, you wouldn't have explored that option that would be such a prevalent thing in your life. All right. So I was thinking of two, the minute I said the game, and I was thinking of two people, and I was wavering. I was like, oh, which one? Because one of them is my 83-year-old, mother-in-law, who is for the first time having to live life on her own. She went from living with her parents to then moving in with her husband when she got married, and he just recently passed. And so 63 years of never living alone. But I'm not going to tell you about that one because that one is just like, there is a big transition, and there's things that she can still do in her life that she never got to do, like writing a children's book. But there's another one that I'm not going to be able to give you as much information about, because it's about somebody that's struggling like really, really hard. And they're in a space where their life is in danger. And if they continue choosing some of the things that they're choosing, they're in danger with their life. And there's a lot of transitions going on with this person. And one of the things that became clear to me hearing you talk, Kristeena, is there's a lot of people in their life that are ready to help them with any version of what they would want to take.
Mhm.
And sometimes in life too, it's just like you could be ready and willing and you're on the sidelines and you're like, I'm ready. But until somebody engages, you also can't help them with their transition. And that's kind of a hard place to be in. But also you have to respect somebody's journey in life. And it's like it's their choice to make it's their choice to set out their own journey. So they have to, make their own choices. So anyway, I know I didn't really say much and it's kind of convoluted, but that's kind of what I was feeling.
I think if I had to piece all of that together, I want to add that it's important because the story that you just shared, Cathey, is about again, that individual has to be ready to receive what someone could potentially give to them. And Marc had mentioned sometimes we need options. The young lady that I'm talking about is someone who's 19, 20, but the transitions happen at different stages of your life, and you begin to look at it as to how do I deal with this situation now? So when I was 20, Cathey was able to have that conversation. But now that I'm older, I too would fall into the Marc mode in terms of I want to present options. So for some of my older clients, like you've mentioned, Cathey, someone that is struggling, someone that's going through something that's a little bit more serious, I would want to deal with it on that level and say, I'm here when you're ready. So I'm presenting a different option than I would maybe my 19 or 20-year-old client or relationship or situation. But I think they all connect because in that transition, it will require you to piece those kinds of things together. It's not a black and white, it's not a blanketed thing. Again, you as the giver, understanding where you are, and as the individual who's potentially can receive, needs to receive, wants to receive, analyzing like, okay, how do we extend this trust level? How do we get to that point that we're both in this together? And so that's a part of the transition, is assessing all of that. And I want to say it again. You don't have to assess going to the supermarket and buying groceries. That's not what we're talking about, people. We're not doing that. You ain't
Much
gotta do
bigger,
it.
yeah.
Everything doesn't require that. Just find a gas station, one of them.
Yeah. Just whatever. Get your milk or bread wherever you want to.
Fine. It's all expensive. Just do it.
Yeah, that's true. Doesn't even matter. It's all expensive.
Oh man. I'm
The-
sorry. I just had such an English teacher moment. I'm not gonna bore you with the details of Shakespeare's Hamlet. I can't even believe I just said that.
He's like, I'm sorry,
on,
I
English
don't
teacher.
want to be the English teacher, but I'm gonna be the English teacher.
Just go back and read the classics. It'll back up what you just said. Not everything has to be overanalyzed. Just make a
Yeah.
choice and figure out what does need to be
Mhm.
analyzed. And
Yeah.
Kristeena, I really appreciated what you shared just now about it comes back to, are you ready?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we have to accept that that's a part of our process and a part of our transition, accepting that the person may not be ready at this moment.
Mhm.
And that's hard. That's
It is.
hard.
It is. And I by no means am I saying that I've conceptualized, I've looked at situations, and I've always had success. I have people now that are like, yeah, I'm not ready for you, coach. No, thank you. And I have to accept that this transition does not include them in that moment. We'll wait for them to come back. If they come back, if they do, if they don't, that's fine. But I'm still going through the transition. I'm still going through the transition of accepting that and then still stacking what I learned from it. That again, sometimes people need options, some people need time. The transition there's no time, there's no shot clock with transitions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, love that. That's a great
line.
analogy.
That's a great line.
That is.
Transition.
Write that one down. Write that one down.
Well, I wrote down too the stacking. I know you mentioned it before, but I was like, it just brought me back to the stacking and how powerful life can be when you think about stacking. We try to make it, sometimes we definitely try to overcomplicate it, right? We do. But I think other times we oversimplify it too.
Yeah.
we try to make it be like, well, I had this transition, and it's like, no, we can stack. Like, and I love, Kristeena, what you're talking about is also, you have such a heart for grabbing things and taking them in, digesting them, and learning from them. And so the stacking that you're talking about too is you're stacking your wisdom. And maybe when you're 90, there's going to be 40 other major things that you've learned that you don't even know right now. And that's
Mhm.
wild to think about, right? It's so wild to think that you need to stack more before you, like, that's kind of blows my mind. But
I
it
think
always,
about that too, Kathy. Like, all right, my mom always says, you wait till you get to be my age. These are the best years. I'm like, Mom, but you said that when I was
every,
entering my 30s. She said, well, no, just keep going. But when I get to that stage of 90 plus, I
yeah.
want to be able to have stacked so much that I have the stories, I have the context, I have the experiences to continue to share. Because if I'm sharing them now, I'm going to always be sharing them. That's just who I am. I'm going to be honest with you. Hopefully someone will be willing to listen when I'm 90. That's,
Oh,
yeah, I need an
that,
audience.
that's a for sure. You
Well, my
definitely
niece
need
says
an audience.
she says, Auntie, don't worry. I'll always listen to you. But we'll,
You're like, I don't know, talk to me when you're 60. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, like,
yeah, exactly. We'll get there.
because you'll be
Kristeena,
stacking
I'll
up
be
your
sitting in
own.
your front row.
I
I'll
will
be
be
sitting in
too,
your front
I
Kristeena.
row.
appreciate that,
Yeah.
teammates. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I'm there. I want to hear. I want to hear what you have to say for sure. No, it's just, you're so brilliant in how you conceptualize it. Mark knows that one of the things that I love when I'm coaching somebody for a TED Talk is, it's one thing to have a good idea, but
Mhm.
it doesn't really hold or stick, or people can't really digest it if you don't make it into an actual concept. And Kristeena, you've created such a great concept with all of the supporting players in there, like stacking. And I mean, you have it so that when somebody hears you talk about that, it's brilliant. Like, you should have already given a TED Talk on this already. Like, this is amazing.
Well, you guys are a part of the transition. Now we're talking
Yeah,
about, again,
that's
there's more than
true. Let's
one.
go. I know,
I
that's
too
true.
am still transitioning in some areas. So Kathy, I do appreciate that. I'm humbled. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Mm.
But you
yeah,
teammates, you're part of
yeah.
this transition now.
Let's go.
TED Talk, here we
I'm
come.
there. TED Talk, here
Man.
we go. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's coming. Yeah.
Hold on,
Chris,
hold on. I just
oh,
gotta say this.
yeah.
Just because Kathy, you said it, and I just wanna sort of put this all together, in my thinking. There's so many levels
Mm-hmm.
of transitions that you presented, from the stacking to the sacrifice, through the pacing, through the players. I mean, there's just so many levels. You got a TED Talk, you got a book, you got a lifetime of transitions to talk about. I'm gonna stop right there, but that's just, I just had to share that. There's so many levels.
I
Well, I
appreciate
know we
that.
didn't even talk, Kristeena, about, I love something that you mentioned off show when I first met you, but we didn't even chat about in this conversation about what it looks like for an athlete to transition from being, I mean, you talked about it a little bit with your life, but what it takes, and then add the layer of like a female athlete who
Mhm.
had to work 10 times harder to get into the WNBA, to be a professional athlete, and what you do with that. And so there's also, yeah, that's a major book. Like that's a perspective that the world hasn't had the privilege to hear much of.
I agree.
Mm.
I agree. And that's something that I personally know that is in the works as I continue to do and share the stories of the many emerging leaders, former athletes, and just everyday dope people on my podcast. That is the book on how, as a female athlete, how I've been able to transition from sport to career, and not just career 9 to 5 corporate America, but what does that look like in 2024? That looks like someone who owns their own business, who has multiple streams of revenue, someone who's able to really capitalize on the, not just the on court, but the off court sacrifices in terms of family and friends, having to deal with different types of people. When you're a female athlete, you don't get the benefit of the doubt all of the time. I know that the world loves Caitlin Clark now, but there are a lot of other women that have paved the way that they're sort of the unforgotten. And so to me, I think it's important that story needs to be shared. And I wanted to just do my part to sprinkle just a little bit of that because I'm her. I'm a part of that. I'm her. And we don't have to wait to give me my flowers. I always tell people that just come on the podcast and talk about it because we can do that now.
Oh, I love it. Kristeena, this is amazing. Well, we've been chatting for a while and so many things, Marc. I'm grateful for how you wrapped up what she said. But in my mind, my brain, number one, I'll never think about transitions the same. And there's so many things that we talked about that were really fruitful. But we want to know, Kristeena, like where has your brain went? Because you clearly have talked about this. You clearly have thought about it. Is there something that's changed for you in this conversation, or there's something that stood out?
Absolutely. I think anytime you can get into a space, and I consider you guys my teammates, get into a space where you could talk about something that you live and breathe. And I live and breathe transitions because my story for me has been everything. I don't get to where I am today, what's today, March 22nd, without having a story. And so having us kind of go back and forth just made me think about, I haven't thought really much about the college, part of the transition. I kind of think about post-college now, just because those are the conversations I have in regards to career. So thinking about those early years, to me, I'm like, oh man, maybe I need to tell more of that story and share more of those nuggets in conjunction with some of the things I share more so with the career space. I think I focus a lot more of that nowadays on the career, but going back to the freshman year, going back to, that sacrifice, that transition from school to school. So maybe I need to highlight that a little more. That's kind of what I heard. And then the second part is, where do I go from here? Like, now that we've sat in this space and we've talked and we've shared, Kristeena, what's next for you? And for me, like, I love to share a relatable story. I love to impart on folks maybe stories that they had not known, information maybe that they were like, didn't know about that. Where do I go from here? So I am currently in the space of writing a book. Now I'm at such the early stages, Cathey. I don't have a title, but I'm at that space that a book is important. So when you asked that, you mentioned it, absolutely. Putting it in print is important. And so I'm currently doing that. That just lets me know I need to get in the second quarter with the book. I'm in the first quarter. Coach just called me off the bench. I'm looking around going, who do I got? I need to get in the second quarter while I'm coach. So I set the screen and then I shoot. Okay, got it. That part.
Yeah. I love it. I
that
love
part
it.
of the book.
But your whole life has been, standing there, taking shots, taking shots. So you're there. Yeah. Oh, amazing. Oh, Kristeena. All right. Well, Marc, you already kind of wrapped up what, but if you did have like one nugget, what's something you're taking away that you're like, oh, I'm really thinking about this?
I'm really thinking about how I am a part of other people's transitions.
Yeah.
And what role can I play, off the bench, on the sideline, or from the stands.
First quarter, second quarter.
First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, post-game
championship game.
Don't forget that halftime speech.
Halftime speech. Right. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I can give a halftime speech.
Oh, yes, you can.
I've heard it, Marc. You're right, Coach.
Go on, Coach.
So I love that. I'm taking away.
I love that, Marc. I would agree. I definitely agree. I think the moving the transition from myself to other people and just understanding the stacking, that's just brilliant. I think it's so brilliant. And I love, Kristeena, you said something that will be burned into my brain forever. Transitioning is happening to all of us. It doesn't matter how old, doesn't matter our race, doesn't matter our gender, doesn't matter our position in life, doesn't matter where we're at, if we're alive, we're transition will and can and probably is happening to us. So
absolutely.
That was amazing. Kristeena, if people want to find you and kind of follow you because you're freaking wise and they're like waiting for that book, they're like, all right, come on, book. Where should they do that?
They can do it on all social media platforms. I'm Kristeena, Kristeena. Marc.Alexander. Yes, spell the name correctly. I also am on YouTube, same thing. They can find me on my website, first name, last name.com, KristenaAlexander.com. And as long as you spell the name with 2 E's, you'll find me. Google's stacking me. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Google.
Google's stacking her. I love that.
Stacking me. Yep. I'm
Kristeena,
appreciative.
I feel you, Kristeena. If you don't put an E in my name, you probably won't find me either. So I get it. But you have 2 E's. So spell her name right and you'll find her.
Yes.
Well, Kristeena, you're amazing. Thank you. Like, this has been a profound conversation. We appreciate having you on because Mark and I, when we created this, we were like, we want to have conversations with people where it's going down. And what I will say today, it went down. So thank you for being on our show, Kristeena. Thank you for having it go down. And thank you for extending our thoughts on transitioning.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm humbled. You guys are my teammates, Mark. Love you to death. Appreciate you guys.
All right, to anybody watching, thanks for watching. You know, this time it went down and next time it will go down too. So keep on tuning in for Marc and Cathey's It's About to Go Down, y'all.